Welcome to part 1 of our Photoshop class. My name is Arnold Faller and step by step I will bring you the basics of Photoshop. In the first few lessons we will cover some of the most essential skills and tools. Later on we will focus on typical tasks that you will face over and over again when working with images. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any new releases. Don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment if you want to see something specific covered in one of the next videos. Let's get started. Okay, I have started Photoshop 2020 here, and I'm starting with one thing that a lot of people think is quite annoying, and that is the recent files that you see whenever you open Photoshop. So you get a list of all the files that you have recently used, and especially when you are teaching the program or when you work with different clients, you not always want to show or see your previous projects here. It's quite simple to empty your list before you do anything else. When you go to File and Open Recent, you will find the same list again, and when you go all the way to the bottom, here is Clear Recent File List. And now we start with a brand new Photoshop. I'm going to start by opening any picture that you have, any picture that you took with your camera and so on. So here is my picture. I'm going to take something here from the desktop, and that will be this one, I guess. Okay, so here is a picture, and I'm going to show you the user interface of Photoshop. What we see on the left, starting on the left side, you have the toolbar with all the tools that we frequently use. The tools, you simply click on them, or the one that you use more often, you can also start with keyboard shortcuts. When you hold your mouse on it for a while, you will get a hint how to use it, and you also see the abbreviation, which keyboard shortcut that you can use. But for more about that a little bit later. Then you have, of course, the picture itself that you just opened. Above the picture, right below the Windows line here, you will have additional information to whatever tool that you're using right now. So whatever tool you pick, the top will look slightly different. So I'm just picking through a few, and you see the top always changes. Then when we go to the left, you will see two columns of information, different kinds of information. Right now we have started Photoshop for the first time, so it means we still have those two columns, which the second one is basically to learn certain skills and tools in Photoshop. We don't need this right now because this is what I'm going to show you, so I'm going to close the toolbars on the tools on the right side, so we have a little bit more screen space. You just go up here where it says Learn. There's those little gray lines, and when you click on it, you can close the whole tab group. It was actually two groups that we had open, so I'm also going to take the second one, the library, and close those tools. So now we only have one column left with some additional stuff over here. So the most important thing that you should see is that we have layers and channels and path, of course, and we have the properties bar open, and we have something to choose and adjust colors. Colors you also saw on the bottom left side, where we have two different colors. Right now they are pretty much the same. It's the foreground and the background color, but more about this as soon as we use colors for the first time. That was the user interface. Whenever you mess up something in the user interface, for example, you take the layers and pull them out and then accidentally close them, or maybe the main toolbar, you accidentally close it. How do you get it back? Here under Windows, you can turn on and off every single window that is open somewhere. But in our case, as I did a lot of changes, it is maybe better to just go up here to Workspace and find that the workspace that we are in right now is called Essentials. That's the default workspace. And whenever you want to go back to the original layout, you can anytime reset your Essentials workspace, and then you'll end up just like we started a couple minutes ago. Unfortunately, with those tabs open again, so I'm going to close those 2 tabs. Now that brings us to the most essential tools that we will use quite a lot in the next few lessons. And the first one is the default selection and move tool, and it's on the top, of course, the move tool. The keyboard shortcut is V as in victory, and whenever you don't know what tool use right now, always go back to the move tool, and you're quite safe there to select something and move something. The other tool that we use a lot will be the zoom tool. The zoom tool is all the way in the bottom of the toolbar. It has the shortcut C as in Zeppelin, and you can use it to zoom into your image or zoom out. We're going to practice that a little bit, and I'll also show you a couple keyboard shortcuts. So either click on the zoom tool or press the keyboard letter C as in zoom or as in Zeppelin, and you see you get a magnifying glass. You can either click into your image and you will zoom in. Whenever you use your Alt key on your keyboard, you hold the Alt key, you can zoom out. You can also drag windows or drag, and then you will zoom in, even with almost without any steps. And you can also do a right click with your zoom tool, and you have a few options. A few things that I use a lot would be fit on screen. So whenever you are zoomed in really wide, then you just do a right click, and fit on screen will give you the picture in a maximum size on your screen. And the other one that I use a lot is use 100%. What means 100%? So as you know that every one of our pictures is made out of pixels, and I'm going to zoom in so you see them. It's made out of all those little square pixels. And in order to judge the quality of your image, it's best to do that in 100%, because now every one of those pixels will use one of the pixels on your screen, so it will show it in 100%. The percentage that you're viewing right now can also be seen here, where we have the name of our file that we opened and the zoom state. So whenever we zoom out for fit on screen, you can see when you fit on screen you are at 35 point something percent, and whenever you click in you will go to 50, 66, 100 and so on. This information up here also shows you the color mode that you're in right now and the color depth, but more about this in a minute. Okay, something that you also might have noticed on our screen, and I'm going back to fit on screen. The picture also, or not the picture, but the Photoshop frame also has those 2 rulers on both sides. It looks like they are by default turned on. The rulers can be first of all seen what the actual print size is right now. So I'm having 56 centimeters by 40 something centimeters. That's the current print size. We will see that in oh, it's inches, sorry, it says inches here, so 56 inches, my current canvas size. But we can also use these rulers later on for using guidelines that we are pulling out. But for right now, we're gonna stick to the rulers so that they're visible. If you want to turn those rulers on and off, you can do so with view. So while Windows turns on all the toolbars and so on, view, for example, turns on the rulers. So here they are, Control R, the shortcut, rulers on or rulers off. So if you don't need the rulers right now and you don't need to know the print size, then it's also fine to keep them off. But with Control R, the shortcut, you can anytime turn them on. So I'm gonna keep the rulers off for right now. So we have the zoom state, the color mode, and the color depth here. So what does that mean? First of all, we want to find out a little bit about our image that we just opened. And no, sorry, before we do that, one more thing. While we zoom in into our image, so right now I'm 100%, there's one important shortcut on your keyboard that all Adobe programs use, and that is the space bar. When you use your space bar, you can pan. So while you're zoomed in, you can use the space bar and then your left mouse button to pan in your image. Okay, the space bar to pan and the zoom tool to zoom in and zoom out. So let's have a look at the most important features and parameters of our image. And the first thing that I would like to show you is how to find out what the image size is. And the image size is measured in pixels. So you count the total amount of pixels, and usually going from horizontal first, not usually, always horizontal first and then vertical. So you have something like, let's say 4,000 vertical by 3,000 horizontal. Let's find out what the size of our image is right now. And when you go to image size, you can find out. So here it says that the image dimension right now are 4,032 pixels by 3,024. Right below, we see what the current print size is. So the document size, when you print it out right now, it will be printed 56 inches wide by 42 inches wide. That means when you print it out, it will have a resolution of 72 dots per inch. What does resolution mean? So resolution is whatever size the image has in pixels. When you print it out in a certain size, then of course its original size will be divided by the print size and you will get the resolution. So the resolution alone is not a value that is important, because resolution only works when you know either the size in inches or in centimeters or whatever you measure, or the resolution and the original size. So the most important value for an image in my view is always its dimensions in pixels. So whoever says something different, it's not really good, because you, with resolution alone, with resolution you need something else in order to get all the information. So right now my picture has 4,000 something by 3,000 something. And please also keep in mind, whenever you change the size of your image, you lose something. So no matter if you make the picture smaller or you make the picture larger, there will be always something lost. When you make it smaller, then it's obvious. So when you, for example, only resize it to half its pixel, then something will get lost. That's every second pixel, and the picture looks different when you are finished. You might not be able to see it, but it will be different. Also, when you are resizing it the other way, you make it larger, the computer will add additional pixels, and those additional pixels will not be, of course, the same as you had before, so it will also be different. The exactly same you only get when you not change the size at all. So try not to just change it for fun, and when you change it, you have to know that something will happen. And also when you resize it both ways, make sure you always keep your original file somewhere if you want to go back to the one that has the original size. Okay, so let's leave that for right now. We're going to use that much more. The next thing is the color mode. The color mode, it says up here, it's RGB. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. That means every pixel here is made out of a red component, a green component, and a blue component. And the color mode can also be seen here under image mode. You can see that we have all kinds of color modes. The most common ones are RGB colors, red, green, and blue, for anything that is presented on screen. So anything on websites, PowerPoint shows, and so on and so on. And the other color mode that is used for anything that is printed on paper, on posters, on something else, and that is CMYK, made out of cyan, magenta, yellow, and key color. And those are the two most important color modes. Also, if you have a grayscale image, and grayscale image there's no colors, it's only scales, only different levels of gray, of black and white, then that will be also a color mode. But you get a warning, for example, if you switch color modes. For some color modes you lose information, and that is something that you should only do when you know what you're doing. So right now let's keep the two RGB and CMYK. If we have time, we can later on take a look at how the RGB is defined and how the CMYK is defined. If we have an RGB image, right now we have an RGB with 8-bit of color information per channel. 8-bit means 2 to the power of 8, and that is 256. So right now we're having 256 different levels of red, green, and blue in every single picture, in every single pixel, sorry. So that means an RGB of 8-bit. That is also visible in the image color mode. So not only can you choose what kind of color mode that you want to use, but also the color depth, how many pixels. So any picture that you take with your digital camera, with your phone and something else, or maybe you download it from the internet, you always, most likely, you will get an RGB with 8-bit per color channel. Okay, what means 8-bit per color channel? Let's have a look. If I pick any color in my picture, so let's start with a light blue from the sky. I'm going over here and I use the eyedrop tool. So the eyedrop tool allows you to click any color in your picture. When you click it, the color will be used as foreground color. So now you can see, let's go for something else, for a dark green, and you see the foreground color changes into whatever pixel you pick. Be aware that you always pick one single pixel, so you pick on one single pixel there. So let's zoom in a little bit over here to our houses. So when you look at the roof, that you can tell that the pixels are very different right next to each other to display the roof tiles. So when you use the eyedrop tool, you only pick one. So there's a big difference between this one and its neighbor. If you want to pick not only one color, but a kind of average color in a certain area, then you can change the eyedrop tool, the sample size, so to say, the sample size from a point sample, for example, to a 3x3 average. So now when you pick somewhere, the 9 neighbors of the pixel are all taken into account, and you get an average color of those 9 pixels. Okay, so that is a way to kind of more or less pick the color tone, and you can go up the way 3x3, 5x5, and so on. So, but for right now, we stay at the point sample. Okay, so I've picked the color, and how does the color look like? You see the color when you click on this little foreground color icon. The foreground color icon will now show you how the color is. And here are the different ways of how the colors are represented. The most common one I mentioned before is RGB. So RGB gives you a red channel, a red, a green, and a blue channel. So right now it's a very light color. You can see that those values are pretty high. The RGB values can be compared to lights shining in red, green, and blue. So if you take those lights and turn them to 0, that means no red, no green, and no blue. If you don't have any light of any color, you will get black. So black is represented as 000 in RGB code. When you give it full power, so that means you have 255 by, no, that is 220, so 255, 255, 255, then you have full power of every color, and that will give you white. If you now say, but you said 256 before, it is 0 to 255, so I get 256 different numbers, including 0. Okay, so, and now if I, for example, go for a 25500, that is a pure red. Only red color is turned on. Or if I take this to 0 and go for 255 green, then I will get the pure green and so on. So those colors are added together, just like different lights would be added together on your computer screen, on a beamer, and so on. On the other hand, when you watch the CMYK channel, the CMYK channel is now made out of 4 different colors, and that is cyan, magenta, yellow, and key color, which is usually black. could be something else that comes from the print process. You got different roles for every color, and you got one for the key color, for the most important one, that is black. So, for example, how is white represented in CMYK? White on piece of paper, on a printer, usually means no pigment of any color. So if you don't put any color on it, it is white. So if I have no cyan, no magenta, no yellow, I will get white. Okay? If I, and the numbers here, by the way, are measured in percent. So it's not from 0 to 255, it's actually from 0 to 100. So if I, for example, go for a key color of 100, you will see that is black. So I have full intensity of my key color, which is black. So black can in this case be 0, 0, 0, 100. On the other hand, black can also be described as, can also be described as 100% of cyan, 100% of magenta, and 100% of yellow. That is also black. But in order not to use every single cartridge of your toner to get a black color, they just added another one that's black, and so you can usually create black like this. So when I go for cyan 100 and magenta 0 and yellow 0, then you see the pure cyan color and so on. So you can go 0 here and find the pure magenta with 0, 100 and so on. So this is how the color are represented in Photoshop. This can be done different ways. There's also a way to use hue saturation and brightness and lab colors and so on. Basically, you choose the hue of your color, so the range. If you take the color wheel, is it in the greens or in the cyans or in the blues or in the magentas? So you choose your color here, and then you choose whatever brightness you have by going left and right, and how dark it is. So this is the brightest, and here is the darkest by up and down. And you can see what the corresponding values do. So you can play around with it and create different colors, and also have a look how certain colors on your pictures are represented. So I'm going to leave it like this for a moment. And to end it here, I would like to do it by finding out how to save your images, and I'll talk a little bit about different file formats. So when you are still working on your image, you still are still compositing something, you're still adjusting something, and you're not quite sure about the colors and how strong and so on, as long as you're still working on it, the only file format to use is the Photoshop file format, and you can get it by File, Save As. Usually you don't have to say File. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do something with the picture, so you don't have to go to File, Save As, or it will right away be shown, right away be chosen. The very first one, Photoshop file format. It is a PSD file format, and the PSD file format, you can just call it whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. The PSD file format will store, I'm not going to save it, will store all the things in your picture, all the layers that you've used, all the adjustments, all the masks, everything that you selected, stored, selections, and so on. So you can just continue working on it as if you have never saved it. It will also not be compressed, so the file might be quite big, but it has all the information in it. It's not, when you save it and you open it again, it's not going to change any of the pixels. So the pixels are just like they are right now. So if you save it as a Photoshop file, nothing will be changed. Why am I saying this? Because the second most, Photoshop is not the most common file format, but the second file format, if you save it as a JPEG, whatever you did to your image, when you save it as a JPEG, so that will be File, Save As, and then choose JPEG. You see there's lots of other options. Here's the JPEG option. You have to keep in mind that every time you save it, again as a JPEG, and you go to save, it will somehow be compressed. And JPEG compressions are usually measured either from 0 to 12, so from here 0 to 12, or sometimes also from 0 to 100. And you can already tell when I move it, see, look at the pixels, they all change. And the more I compress it, the more Typical JPEG errors will show up. So those are the errors will occur in rectangles or in squares like this of 2, 4, 6, 8 pixels. So the more you do it, the more it will be compressed. The file size will get small, but the quality you lose a lot. But every time you save it as a JPEG, it will be different from the one before, because there's always some compression going on. So if I compare it, see before and after, if I just click preview on and off, you can see how it changes. So there's a lot of pixels changing. If you don't want this, don't use a JPEG format. But JPEG is good for internet, sending it by email, small file size, and so on. JPEG, by the way, is also only good for color photography. Any other things like line art or logos or screenshots, something like this, there is better formats for that. But as long as you are still planning to stay in Photoshop, use the Photoshop format. Only when this is an end product and you want to store it on a website or send it to someone, then you use a JPEG. If you have something like line art or logo, the other option would be saving it as a PNG file. PNG files are also stored without compression. So there is some compression in it, sorry, but there's no lossy compression. So it's a lossless compression method. You don't change your picture by changing pixels when you save it as a PNG. This is especially important when there is line art, when there is something with hard contrasts or with color gradients. I will show you later on some examples when you save it as a JPEG, for example, that you get a lot of compression errors in it. With PNGs, you don't get it. PNGs are also good if we have transparent pixels, which we will have as soon as we deal with websites and logos and things like this. Then we use the PNG as well. Okay, so that's a PNG file format for anything on the website, on the internet, and on line art and screenshots. And the last format that I quickly show is the TIFF format. The TIFF format all the way in the bottom. The TIFF format is probably the largest file format, but it has a lot of advantages. It is uncompressed, totally uncompressed, so you will not get any errors in it. You will not get compression errors. The TIFF format also has the big advantage that it can store alpha channels. There's no alpha channel right now in our picture, but that is important for all computer-generated images that you get out of rendering programs, for example. They have alpha channels in it, and you want to make sure that those alpha channels are stored. Also, the TIFF image can also be not only RGB. While the JPEG is made for RGB image, the TIFF can be RGB and CMYK, for example. And the TIFF image also can hold much more than 8-bit per color channel. So the JPEG is a typical 8-bit per color channel, but when you render images out of programs or you export it from some 3D software, you will have much more colors. You will have like 16-bit per color channel, or maybe even 32-bit per color channel, so-called high dynamic range images, and you need a TIFF image or even some other file formats for that. But when we do this later on, there will be more information. Okay, so right now we have TIFF images for anything printed that goes into a layout program. We have the PNG for anything on websites, line art, logos, and that's it, yeah. And the JPEG for anything color photography, for websites, for sending it to someone, and so on, when you get some good compression. And of course, when you keep on working, you always store the Photoshop file, because this is the one that has all the information. Text is still editable, and so on and so on. You keep that in your mind. Okay, guys, that's it for our first overview of the user interface. We talked a little bit about the tools and how we customize the user interface, or better, reset it to our starting state. We zoomed and panned around, and we saved it in different file formats. We looked at image size and how to find out the image size, or the color mode, or even the color depth, and the most common file formats, the Photoshop, the JPEG, the PNG, and the TIFF. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for your attention. And I'll see you in the next video.